The crystal palace of the Velthari Empire rose like a frozen flame against the purple sky. Its towers caught the light of 3 suns and scattered rainbows across the capital city below. For 10,000 years, the Velthari had ruled from this place. For 10,000 years, no enemy had touched its walls. Marcus Cole stood in the great hall and tried not to look impressed. He failed. The Velthari themselves were even more striking than their palace. They stood 8 feet tall, with skin like polished black stone and eyes that glowed like molten gold. They moved with the grace of dancers and spoke with voices that hummed like music. Everything about them screamed superiority, and they knew it. Empress Cyrilla sat on a throne carved from a single massive crystal. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, sharp and cold and ancient. Her golden eyes studied Marcus the way a scientist might study a new species of insect. "This is the human?" she asked. Her voice filled the hall without effort. The ambassador from Earth bowed low. "Yes, your eternal majesty." Marcus Cole offered as a symbol of friendship between our peoples. Marcus knew the truth. He was a hostage. Earth was weak, and the Velthari Empire was strong. The Terran Confederacy needed allies, or at least needed to avoid making enemies. So they had sent him a soldier, a nobody, to serve at the pleasure of an alien empress. Cyrilla rose from her throne and walked down the crystal steps. The court watched in silence. She circled Marcus slowly, examining him from every angle. "So small," she said. "So soft. Your skin is like paper." She touched his cheek with one clawed finger. The touch was gentle, but Marcus saw the threat in it. "Do all humans break so easily?" "We're harder to break than we look, your majesty." The court laughed. Cyrilla smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "I think I will keep this one," she announced. "He will be my consort." The word meant something different to the Velthari. It was not a position of power. It was a position of display. Marcus would be a pet, a curiosity, something to show off to visitors. He understood this immediately. He accepted anyway. He had no choice. The weeks that followed were a special kind of torture. Marcus was given fine rooms and fine clothes. He ate food that tasted like nothing on earth. He slept on beds softer than clouds. And every day, he was reminded that he was nothing. Cyrilla called him her little shadow. She made him stand beside her throne during court sessions. When important visitors came, she would gesture to him and say things like, "Look at my human. Is he not amusing? They need to sleep every single day. Can you imagine?" The visitors would laugh. Marcus would stand still and say nothing. The worst part was that Cyrilla was not cruel in the traditional sense. She fed him well. She never hurt him physically. She simply did not consider him a real person. To her, he was a clever animal that could speak. Nothing more. "Tell me about Earth," she commanded one evening. They were alone in her private garden, surrounded by flowers that sang in the wind. Marcus described his home. The blue oceans, the green forests, the cities full of life and noise and chaos. Syraleth listened with the expression of someone hearing a child tell a story. "It sounds very simple," she said when he finished. "Very primitive. But I suppose your kind has not had much time to develop." "We've had our moments," Marcus said. "Have you?" She plucked a singing flower and watched it die in her hand. "Your entire civilization is younger than some of my dresses. What could you possibly have accomplished?" Marcus thought about human history. The wars, the triumphs, the falls and the rises. He thought about ancestors who had crossed oceans in wooden ships, who had walked on the moon, who had reached for the stars. "We survived," he said simply. Cyrilla laughed. "Every species survives, little shadow, until it does not." A month later, the court held a great feast. Ambassadors came from a dozen worlds. The hall blazed with light and music and the deep hum of Velthari conversation. General Thalvex, commander of the Imperial fleet, approached Marcus during the celebration. He was enormous even by Velthari standards, and his golden eyes burned with contempt. "The Empress's pet," he said. "I have heard you fancy yourself brave. Would you like to prove it?" Marcus said nothing. He had learned that silence was often the safest response. "A simple test," Thalvex continued. "A contest of endurance. I will press upon your mind with my thoughts. All you must do is resist. If you can last 1 minute, I will admit that humans are not completely worthless." The court gathered to watch. Cyrillith observed from her throne, curious. Marcus nodded. "Fine." Thalvex closed his eyes. Marcus felt it immediately, a pressure inside his skull, like a great hand trying to crush his thoughts. The Velthari were naturally telepathic. Humans were not. This was not a fair contest. It was a humiliation. Marcus could not push back. He had no psychic ability at all. So instead, he did what humans have always done when faced with impossible situations. He endured. He focused on his breathing. In and out. In and out. He let the pressure wash over him like a wave and refused to drown in it. He thought about nothing and everything. He remembered the smell of rain on earth, the taste of coffee, the sound of his mother's voice. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Then 5. Thalvex's eyes snapped open. Sweat beaded on his black forehead. The crowd murmured in surprise that Marcus had not won. His nose was bleeding, and his head felt like it would split open. But he had not fallen. He had not surrendered. He had not broken. Thalvex said nothing. He simply turned and walked away. Marcus wiped the blood from his face and looked up at the throne. Cyrillith was watching him with an expression he had not seen before. It was not respect, not yet, but it was something close to curiosity. "Interesting," she murmured, too quiet for most to hear. "Very interesting." Marcus bowed and returned to his place in the shadows. He had learned something important tonight. The Velthari respected power. They did not yet know what kind of power humans possessed, but they would learn in time. They would all learn. The months passed slowly in the Crystal Palace, but Marcus used every moment wisely. While the Velthari ignored him, he watched. While they laughed at him, he listened. While they treated him as furniture, he learned. The palace was a maze of corridors and chambers, built over thousands of years without any central plan. Marcus walked its halls in the early mornings when most Velthari were still resting. He memorized the paths between important rooms. He noted which doors were guarded and which were forgotten. He counted steps and studied shadows. The servants noticed him, of course. They were a smaller species called the Morith, gray-skinned and quiet, conquered by the Velthari long ago. They served in silence and were treated even worse than Marcus. He made a point to learn their names, to thank them when they brought his food, to treat them as people. In return, they told him things. Small things. Useful things. "The old tunnels beneath the East Wing," whispered a servant named Keth one morning. "They were sealed centuries ago. No one remembers they exist." Marcus filed this information away and continued his walks. News from the borders reached the palace in fragments. The Kethrani Dominion, an empire the Velthari had crushed and subjugated 3 centuries ago, was causing problems. Small raids on outpost worlds. Missing supply ships. Nothing serious. According to the court, Marcus was not so sure. He had been a soldier before becoming a diplomatic offering. He had studied tactics and strategy at Earth's military academy. He knew what probing attacks looked like. He knew how enemies tested defenses before launching real invasions. The Kethrani attacks followed a pattern. They struck at communication relays first, then supply lines, then isolated outposts. Each attack was slightly larger than the last. Each attack taught them something new about Velthory. Response times. Marcus spent 3 nights analyzing the data on his personal tablet. The tablet was a gift from Cyrilleth, a toy to keep her pet entertained. She did not know he used it to access military reports that bored courtiers left unprotected. When he was certain, he requested a private audience with the Empress. Cyrilleth received him in her meditation chamber, a room of perfect white crystal that hummed with strange energies. She lay on a floating platform, her golden eyes half closed. "My little shadow," she said without looking at him. "Have you come to entertain me?" "I've come to warn you, Your Majesty." That made her open her eyes fully. "Warn me? How amusing." "About what?" Marcus showed her his tablet. Charts and graphs and attack patterns filled the screen. The Kethrani are not just raiding. They're preparing for war. These attacks are tests. They're learning how fast your fleets respond, where your defenses are weak, which systems you'll sacrifice to protect others. Cyrilleth sat up slowly. She took the tablet and studied it for exactly 3 seconds before handing it back. "You think you understand war better than my generals? I think your generals are not paying attention. And you are? Someone has to." For a moment, something flickered in her golden eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the familiar look of amused contempt. "The Kethrani are broken," she said. "We shattered their fleets. We burned their worlds. They are vermin now, scurrying in the dark. They lack the strength to threaten us. Vermin can still bite." Cyrilleth laughed. She reached out and ran a clawed finger down his cheek, the same gesture she had made on the day they met. "This is why I keep you, little shadow. You are so serious, so worried." She turned away, dismissing him. "Leave war to warriors. Go find something to amuse yourself with." Marcus left the meditation chamber with a cold weight in his chest. He had tried. He had done what he could. Now he had to prepare for what was coming. That night, he returned to the old tunnels Keth had told him about. The entrance was hidden behind a cracked wall in an abandoned storage room. Marcus squeezed through the gap and found himself in darkness. The tunnels were ancient. Dust covered everything. Strange carvings lined the walls, writing in a language the Velthory no longer used. Marcus activated his tablet's light and began to explore. The tunnels ran beneath the entire palace. They connected to the old city sewers, to forgotten basements, to exits beyond the palace walls. Someone, thousands of years ago, had built escape routes for exactly the kind of emergency Marcus feared was coming. He spent weeks preparing. Each night, he carried supplies into the tunnels: food, water, medical kits. A few weapons he had stolen from unguarded armories. The Velthory were so confident in their security that they barely locked anything. The servants helped him without asking questions. They trusted him in a way they did not trust their masters. Perhaps they sensed what Marcus felt in his bones. That change was coming, and it would be violent. 3 months after his warning to Cyrilleth, the first major attack came. A Velthory colony world went silent. When ships arrived to investigate, they found only ashes and a message, carved into the bedrock of the planet itself: the undying commies. The court was disturbed but not afraid. One colony was nothing. The Empire had thousands of worlds. Surely this was just a larger raid, nothing more. Marcus knew better. He had read about a Kethrani war leader named Vorith, called the Undying because he had survived wounds that should have killed him a dozen times over. Vorith had been captured by the Velthory after the last war. He had spent 50 years in their prisons. Now he was free. And he was coming. Marcus doubled his preparations. He mapped 3 separate escape routes through the tunnels. He identified which servants could be trusted and gave them instructions on what to do if the worst happened. And at night, alone in his quarters, He cleaned and checked his stolen weapons. The storm was coming. Marcus could feel it in the air, in the nervous glances of servants, in the way the singing flowers in the garden had gone quiet. He would be ready. He had to be. The night of the crimson solstice was supposed to be a celebration. 3 moons aligned over the capital, casting the sky in shades of deep red and gold. The palace blazed with light and music. Every noble family in the empire had sent representatives. It was the most important gathering of the decade. Marcus stood in his usual place beside the throne, watching the festivities with growing unease. Something felt wrong. The air itself seemed to vibrate with hidden tension. Several servants had failed to report for duty. Small things easily explained, but Marcus had learned to pay attention to small things. Cyrillith sat on her crystal throne, radiant in ceremonial robes that shimmered like liquid starlight. She laughed at the jokes of visiting lords and accepted tributes from distant governors. She had never looked more powerful, more untouchable. The first explosion came at midnight. It tore through the eastern wall of the palace, sending crystal shards flying like deadly rain. Screams filled the hall. The lights flickered and died. When emergency lighting activated seconds later, Marcus saw chaos. Kathrani warriors poured through the breach. They were massive creatures, 7 feet tall, 4-armed, covered in natural armor that deflected plasma fire. Their eyes glowed a furious red in the emergency lighting. They moved like machines built for killing. The palace guards responded immediately, but they were overwhelmed within minutes. The Kathrani had teleported directly into the city using stolen Velthari technology. They had bypassed every defense, every warning system, every carefully planned response. Marcus grabbed Cyrillith and pulled her behind a column as plasma bolts scorched the air around them. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Even now, even with death surrounding them, her voice held contempt. "Saving your life." He peered around the column. The hall was a slaughterhouse. Velthari nobles fell in waves. The guards fought bravely but hopelessly. "We need to move, now. I am the Empress. I do not run. Then you die." Marcus met her golden eyes. "Your choice. Make it fast." For a long moment, Cyrillith stared at him. Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the ancient armor of her pride. "Where?" she asked. Marcus led her through the chaos, using the routes he had memorized over months of exploration. They ducked through servant corridors and climbed abandoned stairways. Twice they encountered Kathrani patrols. Both times, Marcus killed the enemies before Cyrillith could even react. She watched him with new eyes after that. The little shadow, the soft creature, the amusing pet, he moved like a predator. His hands were steady. His aim was perfect. He showed no fear. They reached the throne room as the palace's communication systems crackled to life. A voice filled the air, deep and rough and full of ancient hatred. "Empress Cyrillith." The voice belonged to Vorith the Undying. "I have waited 50 years for this moment. 50 years in your dungeons. 50 years dreaming of your screams." Cyrillith stopped walking. Her face had gone pale, or as pale as her obsidian skin could manage. "You have until dawn," Vorith continued. "Surrender yourself, and I will spare your city. Refuse, and I will burn everything. Every building, every person, every memory of your empire. Dawn, Empress. The choice is yours." The transmission ended. Silence fell over the throne room. Marcus moved to the holographic displays that lined the walls. His fingers flew across the controls, bringing up tactical information. What he saw made his stomach clench. The Kathrani fleet had arrived in overwhelming force. Hundreds of warships blocked the sky. Ground forces had taken control of the city's spaceports, its power stations, its communication hubs. The palace was surrounded. There was no escape by air or space. "It's over," Cyrilith whispered. She stood in the center of her throne room, surrounded by the symbols of her power, and she looked lost. Everything is over. Marcus checked the displays again. Most of the palace guard had been killed or scattered. The few survivors were fighting desperate holding actions throughout the building. No reinforcements would arrive in time. The nearest loyal fleet was hours away. Then he saw it. A single bridge connected the inner palace to the outer districts. The Bridge of Sorrows. It was called a narrow ceremonial walkway built to commemorate some ancient victory. It was the only approach the Kethrani had not yet breached. And beyond it, hidden in the old city, were the tunnel entrances Marcus had prepared. "Not over yet," he said. Cyrilith looked at him. Her golden eyes were dim with despair. "What can be done? My armies are broken. My guards are dead. We are trapped. There are tunnels beneath the palace. Old ones, forgotten ones. They lead outside the city walls. You can escape, reach loyal forces, organize a counterattack. And how do I reach these tunnels? The Kethrani are everywhere." Marcus walked to a fallen guard and picked up his plasma rifle. He checked the charge, adjusted the settings, and slung it over his shoulder. Then he collected a pistol, a ceremonial blade with a surprisingly sharp edge, and 2 thermal grenades from another body. "The Bridge of Sorrows," he said. "It leads to the outer district where the tunnel entrance is hidden. The Kethrani haven't taken it yet. They will. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Yes." Cyrilith stared at him. Understanding dawned slowly in her ancient eyes. "You mean to hold the bridge, alone. Someone has to. You will die." Marcus smiled. It was not a happy expression. "Probably? Why?" The question seemed torn from her against her will. "Why would you do this? I have treated you poorly. I have mocked you. I have treated you as less than a person." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "You have. Then why?" He considered the question. He thought about duty and honor and the complicated relationship between a hostage and his captor. He thought about the servants who had trusted him, about Earth waiting far away, about what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of beings who saw humanity as nothing. "Because I can," he said finally. "Because someone has to. And because maybe, when this is over, you'll remember that humans are not as small as you thought." He walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. The tunnel entrance is in an abandoned building 3 blocks from the bridge. Look for the symbol of 3 circles carved into the wall. The servants know the way. Trust them. Cyrilith said nothing. She stood frozen in her throne room. Watching him leave, Marcus did not look back again. He had a bridge to hold. The Bridge of Sorrows stretched before Marcus like a ribbon of white stone against the burning sky. It was narrow, barely wide enough for 3 people to walk side by side. Ancient pillars rose along its length, carved with the faces of long-dead Velthari heroes. At the far end, across a gap of empty air, the outer district waited in darkness stopped behind him. The inner palace burned. Ahead, he could see the shadows of Kethrani warriors gathering. Marcus checked his weapons one final time. The plasma rifle had 40 shots. The pistol had 20. The blade was sharp. The grenades were armed. It would have to be enough. The first Kethrani appeared at the far end of the bridge. Then another. Then a dozen. They moved forward slowly, cautiously, spreading out to fill the width of the bridge. Their red eyes glowed in F-I-R-E-H-T. One of them saw Marcus standing alone in the middle of the bridge and stopped. It tilted its massive head, confused. This made no sense. One small creature against an army? It had to be a trap. Marcus raised his rifle and fired. The plasma bolt caught the lead Kethrani in the throat. It fell backward, dead before it hit the ground. The others froze for half a second, just long enough for Marcus to fire again, And again and again. 4 Kethrani died in the first 5 seconds. Then the rest charged. Marcus fell back behind a pillar as return fire scorched the air around him. The Kethrani moved fast for their size, their forearms pumping as they ran. He leaned out, fired 3 quick shots, and ducked back as stone exploded beside his head. 2 more fell. The others kept coming. He retreated to the next pillar, then the next, fighting for every foot of ground. The bridge was his ally here. It was too narrow for the Kethrani to use their numbers effectively. They could only come at him a few at a time, and everyone that fell created an obstacle for those behind. The rifle clicked empty. Marcus dropped it and drew the pistol. 20 shots. 30 enemies still standing. He fired carefully, making every shot count. Headshots when he could manage them. Body shots when he couldn't. The Kethrani armor was strong, but their eyes were vulnerable. So were the joints where their forearms met their bodies. The pistol clicked empty. Marcus threw it at the nearest enemy's face, drew the blade, and charged. Close combat was different. The Kethrani were stronger, bigger, and armed with weapons that could cut through steel. But they were slow to turn, and they had never fought anything that moved like. Marcus moved. He ducked under a sweeping blade and drove his sword into a Kethrani's knee. It fell screaming, and he used its body as a shield while he pulled a grenade from his belt. The explosion killed 3 more and threw him backward against a pillar. His ears rang. His vision blurred. Something wet ran down his face blood, probably his own. He forced himself to stand. More Kethrani came. Always more. Marcus lost track of time. He fought with the sword until it broke. Then with a Kethrani blade he pulled from a dead enemy's hand. He fought with stones, with fists, with teeth, when nothing else worked. Every wound he took, he paid back tenfold. The bridge became slick with blood, mostly violet Kethrani blood, but enough red mixed in to show the price Marcus was paying. Bodies piled up until the Kethrani had to climb over their own dead to reach him. At some point, Marcus realized he was laughing. It was not a sane sound. An hour passed. Then 2. The Kethrani commanders could not understand what was happening. They sent squad after squad across the bridge, and squad after squad died. They tried to bring up heavy weapons, but the bridge was too narrow and their own soldiers blocked the way. Finally, they pulled back to regroup. Marcus stood alone among the bodies, swaying on his feet. He counted the dead and lost count somewhere past 200. His left arm hung useless, broken in at least 2 places. 3 deep cuts crossed his chest, and he could feel something wrong inside, something torn and bleeding. 1 eye was swollen shut. His fingers were slick with blood, but he was standing, still standing. A new figure appeared at the far end of the bridge. This one was different from the others. Larger, scarred, wearing armor that gleamed with trophies from 100 battles. It walked forward alone while its soldiers held back. Voreth the Undying. Human, the war leader said. His voice was like grinding stone. You are the one blocking my path. Marcus tried to answer and coughed blood instead. He wiped his mouth and tried again. Seemed that way. Voreth studied the carpet of dead that covered the bridge. His scarred face showed something that might have been respect. I have conquered worlds. I have killed emperors and generals and champions. Never have I seen anything like this. Stick around, Marcus managed. I'm just getting started. Voreth laughed a harsh, bitter sound. You can barely stand. You have lost too much blood. Your bones are broken. Why do you continue? It was a good question. Marcus thought about it while the world swayed around him. Because I'm not done yet, he said finally. Because while I'm standing here, you're not moving forward. Because every minute I hold this bridge is another minute for the people I'm protecting. You protect the Empress? The one who treated you as a pet? I protect everyone behind me. That's what humans do. Vorith drew his blade. It was a massive thing, almost as long as Marcus was tall. Then die like a human warrior. You have earned an honorable death. He stepped forward. The sky screamed. Both Marcus and Vorith looked up as fire streaked across the heavens. Ships, dozens of them, dropping through the atmosphere with weapons blazing. The Velthari fleet had arrived. Explosions rocked the Kethrani lines. Communication channels crackled with desperate orders. The carefully planned invasion collapsed into chaos as reinforcements struck from above. Varus stared at the sky for a long moment. Then he looked back at Marcus. "You knew," he said. "You knew they were coming." "Hoped," Marcus corrected. His legs were giving out. He could feel himself falling. Just had to hold long enough. He hit the ground and did not get up. The last thing he heard before darkness took him was Vorith's voice, filled with something almost like wonder. "What are you people made of?" Then nothing. Light returned slowly. Marcus became aware of sounds, first soft, beeping, quiet voices, the hum of machines. Then came sensation, warmth, softness, a dull ache that covered his entire body. Finally, painfully, he opened his eyes. He was in a medical chamber. Velthari healing technology surrounded him, tubes and wires connected to machines that glowed with soft blue light. His body felt strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. A face appeared above him. Gray skin, dark eyes, Keth, the servant who had told him about the tunnels. "You're awake," Keth said softly. "The doctor said you might not wake up at all." Marcus tried to speak, but only a croak emerged. Keth brought water, helped him drink. "How long?" Marcus managed. 3 weeks in the healing chamber. They had to rebuild half your organs. 17 major wounds. Your left arm was so damaged they considered removing it entirely. The Empress? Safe. She escaped through your tunnels. She reached the reinforcement fleet personally, told them where to strike. Keth smiled, a rare expression. The Kethrani invasion failed. Vorith retreated with what remained of his forces. The Empire survives. Marcus closed his eyes. Relief washed over him, followed immediately by exhaustion. When he woke again, the room had changed. Flowers surrounded his bed, singing, flowers from the Imperial Garden. Gifts covered nearby tables. And sitting in a chair by the window, watching the sunset through crystal walls, was Empress Cyrilleth. She looked different. The cold perfection of her face had softened somehow. When she noticed he was awake, she rose and moved to stand beside his bed. "Marcus Cole," she said. "His name not Little Shadow, not Pet, Your Majesty. The doctors tell me you should have died. Your wounds were fatal. Any Velthari would have died from half of what you suffered." She paused. They counted the bodies on the bridge. 287 Kethrani warriors. "You killed them all. I had help from the pillars." A smile flickered across her face. A real smile, not the cold amusement he had seen before. Always making jokes. Even now, she sat on the edge of his bed. It was an intimate gesture, one that would have shocked the court. Empresses did not sit beside anyone. "I have lived for 600 years, she said quietly. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have known warriors and heroes and legends. I thought I understood courage. I thought I understood strength." She looked at him, and her golden eyes were bright with something he had never seen in them before. "I understood nothing. You small, soft, fragile, you taught me what strength truly means. Not power, not conquest, but standing firm when everything tells you to fall. Fighting when there is no hope of victory. Protecting others when you have nothing left to give. It's what humans do," Marcus said. "Yes." She reached out and took his hand gently, carefully. "I am beginning to understand that. And I am sorry for how I treated you, for how my people treated yours. We looked at your kind and saw weakness. We were blind. Marcus said nothing. There was nothing to say. When you are healed, Cyrillith continued, I would like you to remain at court. Not as a consort. Not as a hostage. As an advisor. She hesitated. As a friend, if you would accept such a thing from one who treated you so poorly. I'll think about it. That is all I ask. She stood, and for a moment, the ancient Empress looked almost uncertain. Then she leaned down and pressed her lips to his forehead, a gesture that, in Velthari culture, signified profound respect between equals. Rest now, Marcus Cole. You have earned it. She left. Marcus lay in the soft bed, surrounded by singing flowers, and stared at the ceiling. Recovery took months. The Velthari healing technology was advanced, but even it could not instantly repair damage so severe. Marcus walked with a limp for weeks. His left arm never fully regained its strength. Scars covered his body, each one a memory of that endless night on the bridge. But he healed. Humans always healed. The court was different when he finally returned to it. Nobles who had laughed at him now bowed when he passed. Warriors who had called him weak sought his advice on tactics and strategy. The servants walked taller, prouder, treated with more respect because of what one human had done for them. General Thalvex, who had tried to break Marcus's mind at the feast so long ago, approached him one evening. The massive Velthari stood in silence for a long moment. I was wrong about your kind, he said finally. I apologize. We're easy to underestimate, Marcus replied. We're small. We're soft. We break easily. Yet you do not stay broken. No, we don't. News spread across the galaxy. The story of the human who held the Bridge of Sorrows against an army became legend. Other species began to look at humanity differently. Perhaps these small, soft creatures were not so primitive after all. Perhaps there was something to learn from a people who refused to stay down. On Earth, Marcus Cole became a hero. Schools were named after him. Songs were written about his stand on the bridge. The Terran Confederacy, once dismissed as a minor power, found new allies and new respect. Marcus himself cared little for fame. He remained at the Velthari court as Cyrillith had asked, helping to build bridges between human and Velthari cultures. He trained young warriors of both species. He advised generals and diplomats. He never forgot that he was a guest in someone else's empire, but he never let anyone forget what guests were capable of. Years later, a young Velthari noble asked him the question everyone wanted answered. How did you do it? How did you hold that bridge alone against so many? Marcus thought about the question for a long time. He thought about the blood and the pain and the endless night. He thought about the faces of enemies he had killed and allies he had saved. I didn't think about winning, he said finally. I didn't think about surviving. I just thought about the next moment. The next step. The next breath. When you stop worrying about the end, you'd be surprised how long you can keep going. The noble nodded slowly. But surely you must have been afraid. Terrified, Marcus admitted. Every single second. Then how did you keep fighting? Marcus smiled, the same smile he had worn on the bridge when death surrounded him and hope was a distant dream. Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid, he said. It means you keep going anyway. That's all courage is really. Just one more step when you want to fall. One more moment when you want to give up. One more breath when you're sure it's your last. He looked out the window at the purple sky and the 3 suns setting over the crystal city. Humans aren't the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the smartest or the fastest or the most advanced. But we never stop. We never give up. You can knock us down 1,000 times, and we'll get up 1,001. The noble was silent for a moment. That, he said slowly, is terrifying. Marcus laughed. Good, Remember that feeling. And remember it the next time you're tempted to underestimate a human. He walked away, leaving the young Velthary alone with his thoughts. Behind him, the singing flowers began their evening song, and somewhere in the distance, the crystal palace gleamed in the fading light. The war was over. The Empire was saved. And the galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Humans were small. Humans were soft. Humans broke so easily. But they never stopped fighting. They never stopped standing. They never